and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. It is time to review Week 16 in the NFL as Christmas Day has now been and gone. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, and I'm this week joined by a returning guest making a second appearance on the show. Back with us today is Allan Woods. Allan, first of all, how are you? How was your Christmas?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Andy. Great to be doing this again. Great speaking to you. And yeah, it was a good Christmas. A bit crazy, young family. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, kind of happy for the craziness to have died down a little bit now.
I can imagine you saying that you have, was it 1 and 3 year olds? So that
Mm,
must be a
yeah.
crazy time of year having kids that young at Christmas time.
Yeah. So like the 3-year-old is sort of past that point where she's terrified of Father Christmas. But my son is still at the point where he wants to tackle the Christmas tree and take off all the baubles or anything like remotely sparkly or hanging off of it. So yeah, it's different challenges, but yeah, a lot of fun. You know, it's a lot more magical when you've got really small children around. So yeah, it's good fun.
And of course, as you saw in the Cowboys season preview, you are a Cowboys fan. Any Cowboys themed gifts for Christmas this year?
Not for Christmas. I actually treated myself to a Cowboys themed gift
Nice.
back on Black Friday sort of time. I picked up a Mitchell and Ness throwback Troy Aikman white
Nice.
jersey. For me, that's got a little bit of sentimental value because the reason I am a Cowboys fan is because my dad bought me a Troy Aikman jersey back in the 90s, albeit the blue one. I got enough blues, so I went white. So yeah, it had a little bit of sentimental value, and yeah, they're really nice, those Mitchell and Ness jerseys as well. You know, if you've got an iconic player, unless they end up being like arrested or for something really nefarious, it's always good to get them out. You don't have to worry about them being traded anymore. So that's quite nice.
Yeah, I do. I do worry about what Broncos fans will do with their Von Miller jerseys. If everything that's been alleged comes out to be true, what they'll do with their Von Miller jerseys. But and of course, Christmas time is always, I think, for Americans, but certainly for UK fans, a difficult time of year for both kinds of football, really, to try and fit in how you're going to watch games and mix it in with family commitments. I mean, how do you normally do Christmas Day NFL games? Are you the kind of person that thinks, well, I've done my duty during the day, I can enjoy the evening, or do you have to sort of sacrifice it a little bit for the good of your family?
Well, thankfully they're on quite late, aren't they? So yeah, I would say most of my family are very young and or not that interested. My wife is very understanding about my Cowboys fandom, and of course they get a lot of late games, primetime games. So yeah, she's very understanding. She definitely takes as like the positive that if the kids wake up, she knows I'm on it like straight away. So yeah, it's good to try and fit in as much as I can, but unless the Cowboys are playing, I'm quite fluid, quite flexible with it, really.
I think we got it a bit lucky. I think we mentioned this certainly last season on the podcast. Might be in a similar time of year where we've got it lucky that the fact that NFL games are on fairly, like 6 p.m. at the earliest. So
Right.
like in America, like say for us in Premier League football or Americans watching NFL football, their time. 1 p.m., 2 p.m. That's a really difficult time on
Right.
Boxing Day or for NFL fans in America Christmas Day to watch these games because you've got the family commitments, you've got dinner being made, you've got all sorts. And I think that it's good to have that thing of, oh yeah, you can actually spend all day with family and then still watch games. And also, I think this is what actually I mentioned on a group chat yesterday about the fact that the Game Pass allow options and certainly allowed me on, so oh, what day was it now? Wherever Christmas Day was, to watch the Raiders Chiefs an hour behind and just fast forward the advert. So and the Premier League missed. I think the Premier League would need that because that would be so handy Boxing Day. Because yesterday I missed Chris Wood getting a hat trick because I was playing card games with family. If I'd had the option of, I know Amazon Prime do actually do it, but that option of being able to watch games later in the day would have been amazing. And also know I watched Liverpool on time at 5:30, but I think we are lucky in the sense in the UK that the games are on post family commitments really. And I think it gets to 6 p.m. You pretty much, if you spend all days with your family as well, you pretty much have probably allowed on Christmas Day to then I was sitting allowed to watch games on my iPad and we were even playing a quiz on the day and we had the TV on mute so I was watching Raiders Chiefs and the start of Giants Eagles on mute whilst playing the quiz. So yeah,
Right.
I think certainly I think at that point at 6 p.m. onwards that you've probably got the free reign to do whatever you want because you've already done all the stuff during the day.
Yeah, definitely. It's very different sort of day commitment to evening commitment. I mean, I don't necessarily have that problem with like UK football because I support a team that's not in the Premier League yet, so and never been in the Premier League, so they're not televised anyway. So that sort of removes that issue. So, but no, I do completely get what you're saying. It is a very different sort of thing, like a day thing to an evening thing. For me, it definitely suits better being an evening thing, at least at the moment. Although the late nights are pretty rough at times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you said they're not Premier League yet, and I apologize
Yeah.
if I've already asked you this question, but who's your football team?
I'm probably being very optimistic that use the word yet. I am a Stevenage fan,
Oh,
so they're
that is
currently
awesome.
in the playoffs of the League One. This is probably like
Oh,
as high. This is pretty much as high as we've ever really been. To be honest, we have made the playoffs once before, but yeah, it's a young club. It's only been going like less than 50 years. So when you're battling against a lot of other clubs around them, like the Portsmouths and Boltons and Derby counties and stuff, it's nice to be up there with some of the big boys. But yeah, one day maybe. Who knows?
yeah.
Maybe
I
we need
remember.
someone a lot of money to sort of give us a bit of a push, to be honest. But Man City never used to be that much of up to much. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
just got a bit more history.
I
So
literally watched about 2 days ago. Watched City on there's like a Sky Sports retro game when they were playing in the Championship against Blackburn Rovers. So yeah,
yeah,
you never know. You actually are amazingly our second Stevenage fan in 3 or 4 weeks. We had Greg Kett, our
yeah.
Titans fan, also Stevenage fan. Yeah, he came on to review Titans Dolphins. So and that whatever week at NFL that was. So yeah, a lot of Stevenage fans come to the pod recently.
Well, yeah. See, if you're a Stevenage fan, you need to be distracted with some other sport as well. So that's probably the reason. But no, I know Greg. Know him personally. Actually, I'm not wearing it now. I'm wearing a Dak jersey, but he actually picked up a CD Lamb jersey for me. So I used to actually be on a podcast a long time ago during COVID, and I met Greg through the other sort of co-host, and he was in the US. I think on your pod you were talking about how many games he'd attended, which is a great episode. If anyone's not listened to it, go
Okay,
check it
no.
out. And he was in a shop in the US, and he just messaged me and said, "Hey Alan, you're literally the only Cowboys fan I know. CD Lamb jerseys are half price in this Nike store. Do you want one?" And I was like, "Yeah." So like I do know Greg personally. I've watched Stevenage games with him. I've exchanged jerseys with him, I guess you could say. No, he's a top guy. And yeah, big Titans fan, as you know.
Well, I never knew that you two knew each other. That's exclusive on the podcast. That's two of
Yeah.
our guests. I didn't realize you were even friends. That's a really nice story. Now moving on to the games in week 16. Thursday night football, Rams beat the Saints 30-22. Then on Saturday, the Steelers beat the Bengals in surprise fashion, 34-11. The Chargers almost made my Christmas. We almost beat the Bills, but they lost 24-22. And then on Sunday, there was shock losses for the Colts as they lost 29-10 to the to Falcons, and also the Texans lost in surprise fashion to the Cleveland Browns, losing 36-22. The Packers almost let a big lead tip against the Panthers, but ultimately beat them by 33 points to 30. And then the Lions won their first NFC North title in 30 years as they beat the Minnesota Vikings by 30 points 24. Now, this is a big result. I think for all NFL fans, for all Lions fans especially, I mean, this is obviously their first division title in so long. I mean, this is the franchise that has been so bereft of any success. So for me, I think that to me, the Lions, I think they're such a good place right now. Dan Campbell for me, I don't know what you think, Alan, is probably for me, he's coach of the year. I'd have said Shane Steichen until Sunday, but I think for what he's done with that team the last season and a half, really, if you go from when he went 1-6 last year, from that week 7 onwards, what they've done just phenomenal. And the Vikings still got a chance of playoffs. So for you, Alan, in terms of what do you think of the game itself? Then further from that, what do you make of the Lions' chances of winning potentially winning a few playoff games?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you say, it's an amazing story for the Lions, and it's a long time coming. I got a friend who's a Lions fan that used to be on the podcast I used to work with, and yeah, it's always been, we're quite ridiculed in like our friendship group, I guess, with me being a Cowboys fan and sort of giving you hope and then letting you down, but then Lions fan just never having any hope. So they're just always not really let down, I guess. Uh, yeah, I mean the Lions have had a great season, and in fact, he actually called that they were going to have a good season last year, and I thought he was mad. So as you say, Dan Campbell's really turned it around in Detroit. They're definitely not invincible. They give up a lot of points to teams that I think are not actually that great. Like the Vikings were playing Nick Mullins at quarterback. He gave up 4 ints on the game, and the Lions still only won by 6. You'd probably think that if they were playing, uh, I'm maybe not the biggest Kirk Cousins fan in the entire world, but if Kirk Cousins is in there, they don't lose Addison to injury, lose Hawkinson to injury. It was probably against them, the Vikings, but there's probably a little bit of destiny in there as well. The Lions have been so patient, Lions fans have been so patient, and they're a very loyal fan base, so they definitely deserve something to smile about at long, long last.
Yeah, and I think that I think they've always kind of everyone's second team. I think certainly since Dan Campbell came in, I think, and everyone watched Hard Knocks. I think really everyone has taken to Lions, and I think it's basically what we saw with the Browns in 2020. The fact that everyone viewed them as a team that they rooted for because of so many years of hurt, and I think the Lions have had even more lack of success than the Browns have, and I think that it's yeah, I think that they're right now they got the same amount of wins as the 1 seed. So I think right now they could still get that 1 seed. They got a big game against you guys, of course. On they're calling it Monday Night Football on a Saturday, which I find incredibly weird, but I really really confusing as well. But that should be a big game. And I think if they beat you guys, I think that Niners ultimately have the 1 seed, but I think the Lions could certainly get the 2nd seed. But I think to be what's going to be minimum third seed in the NFC. I think that's absolutely massive to host an NFL game. It's the first one they've hosted since they won the division all those years ago. So yeah, it's big time for Detroit. But then on the other side, the Vikings they go 7-8, but they're still on the bubble. And this is a team that have had so many injuries. I mean, you look at Kirk Cousins, we mentioned is then Jefferson's been out for most of the year. Allison and Hawkinson went out this game. I mean, that's pretty much their 3 best offensive weapons and their quarterback as well. It's just been a really weird season because you had that 1-4 start, 1-5, whatever it was. Then they went on a 4 or 5 game win streak with Josh Dobbs, and then they've sort of been on a bit of hit and miss since. So, do you see them potentially sneaking in, or do you think this consistency is ultimately going to cost them in the playoff bubble?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was literally just looking up their schedule. So they're playing at home to the Packers, who I'm not mad on, but then they play week 18 against the Lions at Ford Field, which I don't see them getting a win. I think they need to win out if they got a chance, really, because they'll end up with, if they go 1-1, they'll have a losing record, right? So I don't think. I mean, that does happen, but I don't think that they're going to be fortunate on this front. And to be honest, it's probably for their own good, as you say. They're so banged up. There's usually one team that sort of sneaks in and then gets an absolute whipping. And the defense has played well, like the last 3-4 weeks for the Vikings, and that's been a real turnaround as well. But I think they've lost just too much on offense. Like Jefferson's amazing, like probably top 1, or maybe top 2 in receivers in the league. But there's only so much you can do. If there's not a lot else around him. Like KJ Osborne's okay. He's probably better than like just a guy, but it gets very thin very quickly for the Vikings. So it's probably for their own good that they actually don't make it. That's sort of my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the ones where I think you've seen teams in the past like you've seen obviously the obvious one everyone points to is Nick Foles, the Eagles, but that team was
Mm-hmm.
probably better than the Vikings, and they had really no injuries apart from Carson Wentz from memory, whereas the Vikings have got so many injuries different places. But as a Brian Flores stan, I would always love to see them do well. I always loved Brian Flores, even to this day. I loved him when he was our head coach. So I hope they do well on that point of view. But I think ultimately I think with their schedules, you just pointed out, I think ultimately they will fall short. I think if they had the Mullins there, if they had Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison, you could see maybe sneaking a win for that alone.
Yeah,
I think with those
sure.
players injured, I just think that ultimately it's probably too much. And I think that yeah, it's just going to be. And I think they play the Packers next as well. And I just think ultimately that will probably seal their fate. Go 7-9, and if the Seahawks and Rams both win, then and they got very winnable games, and that actually mathematically rules them out. So I think ultimately it's going to be the Rams, Seahawks, and Packers for me. I mean, the Saints and Falcons are amazingly still in contention. We could still have three teams from that division in the playoffs, but I don't see that happening. So I think for me, it's going to be the Rams, Seahawks, and Packers. And just whilst we're here, look at the sort of those three teams I mentioned. Which two teams do you think is going to make it as a 6 and 7? Because it's obviously going to be the Cowboys or Eagles as the fifth seed. So I think 6 and 7 seed and is really, I think for me personally, between three teams, you might think differently, Alan. I don't know. But who would you say are making the playoffs that aren't the second team in the NFC East?
I mean, there's a lot of teams here that I mean, all the teams on the bubble have got significant holes in one way, shape, or form. We already talked about the Vikings at length. The Seahawks. I mean, that they're trying to keep playing Geno, who, to be fair, had an amazing game against Dallas just a few weeks ago, but has been injured since then. Didn't look as good this past week. The Rams, I definitely think are going to make it. I think they're playing some really good football, much better than I thought they were going to be playing this year. Obviously, players like Puka Nacua have been massive on offense, so it's not just the Cup show. Cup's obviously coming off a big injury. He's had a few of those in his time. Uh, yeah, and then sort of like the rest. It's sort of how I look at like the rest of the 7-8s. There's a lot of 7-8s here. Um, yeah. Who are the Bears playing? I know that's like a real long shot. Like I imagine like everything needs to really.
Well, they've got the Falcons. Then I think what could be a massive game come week 18. They have got. I've lost it on the page
They've
now.
got the Packers
Packers, yeah. So
at
that could be
Lambeau.
when you're in.
Right. So I mean they're playing two 7-8 teams.
Yeah.
Let's be like controversial. Like not that I'm a massive like hot take guy. Let's say the Bears like sneak in. Like if they
Oh, I
I
like
actually think they could do it. They say like the defense is playing great. As long as TJ Moore's not, I think he did come back actually on the weekend. But he's obviously so important to them on offense. Yeah, Justin Fields seems to have sort of picked it up a little bit of a gear. The defense definitely picked up a gear. They just don't look like a team they're just trying to lose anymore. Like it felt like they were trying to throw. Well, no, it's bad to say they looked like they were throwing games, but some of the things they were doing, it did sort of question their motives a little bit earlier on in the season, for me at least. So yeah, I think the Falcons are non-scary, and the Packers, yeah, are not particularly terrified by them. They're really bad against the run, and obviously Justin Fields, that's like his bread and butter. So yeah, let's go with the Bears.
that's really interesting because the Rams are the Giants, fair enough, but the Seahawks have the Steelers, and they had a great game against the Bengals, and then the
Hmm.
Packers got the Vikings, but then the Rams have the Niners on the last day of the season. So if the Rams somehow lose to the Giants and Tommy DeVito, and then the Bears beat the Packers, they'll be one win behind, and then if the Rams do lose to the 49ers, and the Bears then will have the Packers week 18. That could be winning your in. So I probably think it's a long shot. I think it's the after. I think the Giants will lose to the Rams and the Seahawks will probably beat the Steelers, but you just never know in the NFL. And I think certainly with the way they're playing recently, if they get in, that momentum's there with them. You just never know. They could easily shock everyone and make at least a divisional round. They could even sneak into the NFC title game. But I think ultimately, I think they will fall short. I mean, right now they've got a kind of 1% chance, according to the NFL.com, of making the playoffs. But you just don't know.
1%.
Yeah, well, that's what NFL's saying.
Wow.
But then it's if they win and if they lose. So either way, but I think ultimately. Yeah, but you never know. I think either way, they'll have a top pick regardless because of the Panthers. So I think they'll probably go. I reckon they'll go receiver more than quarterback. They'll probably get Marvin Harrison, their receiver, to go with DJ
Yeah.
Moore. That's a good duo there.
Yeah, it's amazing, dude.
Yeah, exciting times for Bears fans and an exciting future. Heading on to the other lot of games in Week 16. So we've mentioned the Vikings line. So the Jets avoided a shock comeback loss to the Commanders, beating them 30-28 with a last-second field goal. The Seahawks beat the Titans 20-17. Talking about the Bears, they beat the Cardinals 27-16. The Patriots survived another comeback as well. They beat the Broncos 26-23 on Christmas Day morning. And then the other one we talk about is the Jags Buccaneers. The Buccaneers won the South Derby as the leaders of the NFC South beat the leaders of the AFC South 30-12 in Tampa Bay. Now, this makes for an interesting final to eat because we mentioned the Colts losing, mentioned Texans losing as well, they'd have taken over that one seed if they'd won those games, which they should have won on paper. So the Jags still lead the division, but they're only literally they've got the same amount of wins as the Colts and the Texans. And you look at the fact that they are playing the Panthers, but the Colts are playing the Raiders and the Texans are playing the Titans. So all teams could win that week 17, which could make an exciting week 18. Which looking at the sked the that'll be against the Titans. So yeah, and the obviously Texans play the Colts. So that AFC South battle is wrapping up, and then the NFC South. Looking at that, of course, the Buccaneers lead the way with a 8-7 record, one win ahead of the Falcons and the Saints. I mean, for me personally, I think the Buccaneers are looking like they're going to win this division, but the AFC South, I think, looks incredibly open. I don't know what your thoughts are on that division race for both divisions.
Well, let's go with the AFC South. I have been surprised by the Colts because I think they've played better than I expected. Although I've always been a big Gardner Minshew fan, so I'm sort of pleased for him. I've always felt like he deserved a bit more of a shot. I know he's only having a shot because Richardson's injured, but there's definitely something about him. There's definitely he's better than just sort of your standard backup, in my opinion. And he's gelled well with the receivers there. They had a terrible game against the Falcons this past weekend. The Texans need CJ Stroud back because I don't think the defense is good enough at this current moment in time. So some of the great games that Stroud's had is because he's had to throw and he's had to sort of force some plays. If he's healthy, the Texans could squeak into the playoffs. The Jags are really quite worrying. As someone that, like, I don't necessarily like talking about fantasy football too much because no one's interested in anyone's fantasy team, but like, I have quite a lot of Trevor Lawrence in fantasy football, and he's not been right, and now he's got a shoulder problem, and it's almost like I'd rather him not play rather than even give me a difficult decision, let alone like Doug Peterson. So and again, I don't rate their defense at all. So it feels like they need to do something on offense. Obviously, lost Christian Kirk already. He's on IR. Not sure what the status of Zay Jones is. Calvin Ridley's been a bit, looks like he's not played in a couple of years, some weeks. So yeah, of the top three in the AFC South, the Jags are probably my least favorite to progress. Then the NFC South, I have a real rose-tinted glasses issue with the Buccaneers. And you mentioned earlier about there was a time where people like the Browns. There was a sweet spot with the Browns. And this is a slight tangent because a lot of people like laughing at the Browns for a long time. And then Baker got drafted and they got OBJ. And you're like, oh, actually, the Browns are actually quite cool. And then, of course, now Baker's not there. And then they traded for Deshaun Watson. And it's like, okay, straight back to what it was like before for a lot of people where they didn't want to be seen supporting the Browns again. But I have always liked Baker, even when he's been rough. And his stats are probably better than he's actually been, I would say, this season. But I'm glad that he's sort of fallen on his feet in Tampa. So I definitely think I'm going to stick with the Buccaneers to make the playoffs. And then the Saints and Falcons, they just sort of exist. It's sort of my feeling on them, which is a bit rude. But Derek Carr's not it anymore, personal opinion. And the Falcons, Arthur Smith is not it. So I think there's just too many bits I don't trust to actually really achieve much. I expect the 1% chance of making the playoff Bears to make the playoffs over the Falcons and the Saints. So that probably tells you a lot about how I feel about those teams.
Yeah, I just think they're way too inconsistent, and the Buccaneers have been very consistent in recent weeks. And Baker Mayfield is almost playing the quarterback the Browns wanted all those years. So it's I think Buccaneers for me, I think make it in, and I think Jags, I think they'll sneak in because I think the Texans and Colts have got. I think they got fairly tough schedules, so I just think ultimately the Jags will take it. But I do think that whoever gets to play them, I'd say right now, looking at the way it's going, you can almost tick off a guaranteed win. I think the Browns would beat them. I think the Bills would definitely beat them, and I think almost we talk about in the Fins Nation podcast I do with Dolphins, where we talk about one in the second seed over the fifth seed. But if you're the fifth seed, you'd rather play the Jags away than play the Bills at home. So it's I think every team right now will want the Jags from the playoffs because they're not right. I mean, they had what, 0-2 start, then they won 4 or 5 games straight, or they lost two in a row, then they lost, and then they've had a really weird up and down season, almost the opposite of last year, where they had a great run down the stretch and sneaked in. It could be the case this year where they have a good battle and form and get knocked out, and some team good ahead of them. And I think that they have to be careful about that. But I think they'll find a way to sneak in. But I do think ultimately they will be one and done. I don't see them being any team. There's no team I can think of they could be unless injuries really fall foul on a team they get to play. The one team's maybe the Browns. I think obviously without a real quarterback there, they could feast on that. Josh Allen could have a day. But I think apart from that, you're looking at all the other teams. There's no way they beat the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins. Really,
Andy,
anything
everyone beats the
in the
Chiefs now.
playoffs. I still think the Chiefs come the playoffs. We'll mention it in a minute actually, but I think come the playoffs they'll still win games. I think you cannot. It's like the Patriots. You can't write them out until they're knocked out of the playoffs because they got the only team with an active quarterback starting who's won a Super Bowl. And I think ultimately the Chiefs are still going to find a way to win games. I think I will not be shocked if they're still lifting that AFC trophy, going to Vegas as the AFC representative come February. But speaking of the Chiefs, actually, we've gone to that game now. A shock loss for the Chiefs, 20-14 loss to the Raiders. I believe it was back-to-back plays from Mahomes, pick sixes. Watching it with my brother, who's actually a Raiders fan, so that was quite a nice experience. But the Chiefs have really struggled to perform recently. What's your take been on what's been a real slump of late for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to put it down to be honest. You go back just a month and people were talking about the defense as being a fantastic, maybe top five defense in the NFL. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is always capable of some magic, but starting to see the pinch a little bit. He's obviously got a massive contract. They've struggled to find receivers that are going to sort of fit into their way of doing things. They took a punt on Tony. We don't need to reflect on some of the, things he's done in recent weeks. Kelsey's been banged up. People would probably say he's distracted. People already know what that is about.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. But I think it's more that he's probably playing through something than something else. And I think they've probably masked quite a lot of things in years past with Travis Kelsey maybe not having a receiver like you. They lost Tyreek Hill and everyone said, oh, how are they going to survive? And they did better than just survive. But I think something's just not quite right. And I don't necessarily think it's a locker room thing. I just think, if you've got a team, winning's infectious, right? But also if you've got a team that is used to winning and they start losing a bit more, I just wonder if they're not quite sure how to handle that with some of the personalities in the locker room. I really can't put my finger to it. But then on the complete flip side, the Raiders look like a team possessed since they lost their coach. So they look like a team that are actually really playing for their team. Aiden O'Connell, I mean, I didn't watch all of this game, but I definitely watched large stretches of it. And there was a stat that came out just before the end of the third quarter. And Aiden O'Connell, who's been playing quarterback for the Raiders for a few weeks now, rookie, he had 0 passing yards in the second and third quarter, and they still beat the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. It's just, so something's really not quite working. The defense has been playing well for the Raiders. That's been a significant improvement, but I can't quite put my finger on what's gone wrong at the Chiefs other than, a niggly injury to Travis Kelsey shouldn't have this much impact.
Yeah, I do think we all remember Kelsey is 34, and I think that he's still got just under 1,000 yards despite all these problems they're having. But I do think ultimately he is showing signs personally of a little bit of decline. Still, great player, and obviously he's for me the best tight end of all time. And I think that by his standards is bad, but I think compared to most tight ends, it's pretty good. But I think I wouldn't be shocked if they go for wide receiver in free agency or the draft. I think I wouldn't be shocked if they go for Devontae Adams. I mean, he's someone that clearly doesn't want to be at the Raiders. I think he's been disgruntled recently. I think they could go for someone like him. But I think this is a simple team that, they've had 5 straight years with AFC Championship appearances. Mahomes has yet to play a road game in the playoffs. Likely will be this year, unless the Ravens and Dolphins both lose in the first round. So it's a classic case of they're just not used to losing games. I don't think Mahomes knows how to take it right now, and Kelsey the same thing. But the Raiders, well, we mentioned about the Bears sneaking in. I mean, so the Colts play the Raiders. If the Raiders beat them in Week 17, they'll go level on record wise. They'll be ahead on the head-to-head record. The Bills are playing Bills and Browns. You probably think will go ahead, but then the Texans play the Titans. That's not a guaranteed win, especially if Stroud isn't 100%. The Bengals play the Chiefs. The Chiefs could easily beat them on their day. The Steelers beat the Seahawks. They could easily lose that. So if the Steelers, Bengals, and Texans all lose, and the Raiders beat the Colts, and the Raiders go into the playoff hunt with a week to go, that would just be such a shock if they were to make it in. And then Raiders week 18, they play
Broncos.
the Broncos. The Broncos, they look like they're
Legion.
now feet in the sun, on the beach and all that. So for that kind of point of view, the Raiders certainly obviously need a lot to go their way, but they can certainly sneak in, and I think that should be the final nail of the coffin in terms of giving Pierce that job, and that should be the final. That should be the thing that gets in that job home. That should be the sticking point. I think the Chiefs win probably should be that, but then to have no passing, to have that stat you just mentioned there with Aiden O'Connell, I think that it's almost like the Chiefs beat the Raiders. The Chiefs beat the Chiefs more than the Raiders beat the Chiefs. If I'm honest, I think there's a lot to the Chiefs' problems more than the Raiders. But I think the Raiders certainly should be a team to be feared, who could potentially sneak in. And I think momentum-wise, I think they could certainly give a good go to whoever they play, whether it's the Dolphins or the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Yeah, to be honest, I hadn't given it a thought that they could. You are completely right. I mean, Aiden O'Connell had 62 yards passing this past weekend against the Chiefs, which is not sustainable. But you look at their last three games, scored 20 against the Chiefs, 63 against the Chargers, and then scored 0 against the Vikings. So I'm not really sure they even know who they are at this current moment in time. But I think you're right. You can't really rule them out. The Colts are definitely not the perfect package. If they win that, Broncos already came out and saying they're benching Russell Wilson earlier today. I don't know if you've seen that already.
Wow. Okay. Is that because the season's done?
Oh, breaking news.
That is exclusive on this podcast. Is that because they're
it's not exclusive. It is out there. I'm not like got insiders to the Broncos like locker room or anything like that.
Is it because they're thinking the season's done, or they're just not happy with him, or what's the reason behind that? Do you know?
I believe they're as good as mathematically out of the playoff contention, but also there's loads of injury guarantees on Russ's contract. So if he got injured, then I mean they're already fairly financially annihilated from his contract anyway, but they'd be even worse off if he actually got injured.
Wow.
That's what my understanding of a Broncos fan who's a bit closer to it than me. The Broncos, you'd like to think they probably want to beat the Raiders, but how many people are really going to be that bothered?
No,
Jarrett Stidham is the backup. So,
I mean, again,
it could be another 3-0 shootout.
Oh God, hopefully not again. Hopefully not again. That wouldn't be good. That would not be good at all. And then, of course, the one game that we were both looking forward to the most this weekend just gone. The reason why I brought you on the podcast, it was Cowboys against Dolphins. The game did finish by 22 points to 20 as a win for the Dolphins, but it was really was, Allan, a end-to-end game.
Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoyed it, despite the result, to be honest. I mean, it was a late night. I thought Dak played well. I thought he had a good bounce back from the game against the Bills the week prior, although I don't think a lot of that loss was on him, per se. The Dolphins were very good at getting to Dak. That sort of was my concern. But as the game continued to go on, I thought Dak had an outstanding game, considering he spent half the game lying on his back. The O-line is good when fully healthy, and it's diabolical when not. And you can tell, as someone who doesn't watch the Dolphins all that often, you can tell that they've schemed around, they want to protect Tua as much as possible by getting the ball out as quickly as possible to anyone, receivers, backs. Obviously got some exciting backs. Most have scored 100 touchdowns or whatever this season so far. A-Chain's absolutely rapid. And then you got the likes of Waddle and Tyreek further up the field as well. So, yeah, you can tell they really have game plan for that. and they'll have a hold against Micah Parsons that just never gets called, but that's every week, so that's pretty normal. It was a good game. And I was messaging a friend throughout who's a Dolphins fan, and I think the summation was that it looked like two good teams that were playing against each other, and it felt like whoever had the ball last was going to win, and that's the last ball possession fell to the Dolphins, and the Cowboys went, "There you go, we'll make it a little bit easier for you. We'll give you, an extra 15 here, and you know the run defense can absolutely crumble here and there as well." So yeah, they made it as easy as possible probably for the Dolphins to win, unfortunately, on that last drive. But all in all, it was an enjoyable game. And I say there's definitely positives for the Cowboys in that game compared to the week prior against the Bills, where they just looked completely out schemed, out coached in every way possible. It gave me a little bit more confidence going forward, despite it being another close loss. And then on the other side, for the Dolphins, they finally beat a team with a winning record. So you must be pretty pleased, Andy.
I am, but the one caveat is that you're basically the Dolphins of the NFC. Both your team and my team were good teams who can't beat good teams and bully bad teams. I think that whilst I was happy that we finally ended that sort of streak, and I think it was the first time since week 3 of last season. But at the same time, we beat a team that basically can't beat good teams either. So I think obviously we know what's coming on Sunday. That if we can win that game, I think that'll be a real sign and a real statement from us. If we can beat the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore as well, I think that will be the ultimate answer to that narrative. But I think also, yeah, you mentioned just then about I think the flag obviously helped us get into field goal range. But I think ultimately I was happy with our performance. Tua obviously didn't throw any picks or make any silly decisions. I think that we're obviously up against, I think for me personally, still a top 3 defense in the league, and you got one of the best defensive players in the entire league in Micah Parsons, who is Micah Parsons. He's that good. I think I was happy with the fact that we got the win, and I was happy with the fact that we conceded a touchdown. Well, I think it was it 2, 3, 4 minutes left of the game with Brandon Cooks, and we still managed to get down the field and still get what we needed and actually close it out in crunch time. But I think first I want to praise is Jason Sanders. I mean, 3 50-yard or more field goals in the game, and of course another one that won the game as well. I mean, he at times this season has been a bit of a hit and miss. He's missed quite a few field goals, especially from 50 yards or more. That's been one of his weaknesses this year, have been from that range. So to do that and to him to do that, I think it's great for him, obviously, but I think it's good for the fact that we know we've got someone who can perform under pressure. So when it comes to the playoffs, like we're guaranteed now, I think that it'll be really handy to have him build on that. I know he can do it when it matters, but I think ultimately, Bradley Chubb for me, I thought was fantastic. I think he's really been good in recent weeks. 11 sacks in the whole year. That puts him, I think, tied for 14th in the entire league. He's number 1 in the whole league for forced fumbles. He's having a great year. And really, I think ever since Jalen Phillips went out injured, he's just taken his game to the next level. I think he's been brilliant in the last few weeks. And he's finally showed us why we gave away that draft pick to get him in the trade deadline last year. So, yeah, I think very happy. And I've only seen us ever play 2 games in the playoffs my entire life. I've never seen us have back-to-back years in the playoffs in my 12 years being a fan. So for me, it was amazing just to see that and just to see us actually make the playoffs and not do it in week 18. I think to do it with 2 games left as well, I think shows progress. And obviously we'll mention the Ravens win in a minute, but if we beat the Ravens, will mean we'll have number 1 seed going into the final week and have the tiebreaker over the Ravens. So if the Ravens had lost to the Niners and we'd beat the Titans, that might be the division wrapped up. But that's why the number 1 seed wrapped up. But you can't win every game. So for me, yeah, a lot of positives. But I think ultimately both teams can go away, I think, happy from this game. I think both teams showed good signs and bad things. I think mostly good things. I think really both teams sort of won this game, I think.
Yeah, another shout out on the Dolphins defense to Van Ginkel, who's been great in the nickel. Yeah, the Cowboys sort of lost it themselves a little bit with like the 1 yard fumble on the Dolphins 1 yard line early on, and yeah, some of the bad penalties. But that's who they are. They're really ill disciplined under Mike McCarthy. Who it's hard to say I don't like Mike McCarthy because I think there's been some great performances this season, but ultimately he is still who he's always been, and I'm not historically not been a fan of what he's always been. So I guess I'm not shocked. I'd rather lose these close games now. Like there's been quite when we're actually in these games on the road and we lose against good teams, like we lost to the Eagles by like a few. It must have been 4, so I was a field goal at the end, and losing to the Dolphins here by 2 against, I believe, quality opposition. Sometimes you just need something to break your way, and the Cowboys didn't really get anything that like that, whereas the Dolphins got the fumble on the 1 yard line. I'd rather some of this stuff not go our way now and hopefully get a bit of fortune in the playoffs, and then you just never know. Maybe something will happen, but I don't know. I'll try not to get my hopes up too high, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like
you both.
we need everyone healthy on that O line. We need the run game to reappear from somewhere because it's transitioned massively from last year to just give the ball to Tony Pollard loads more to let's just give the ball to Dak a lot more to throw, who's had a great season. Obviously, people talked to him up in the MVP conversation as little as just a few weeks ago. I still actually think he's not the reason they've been losing, but yeah, it is a team game at the end of the day. So time will tell. And I think the Cowboys will beat the Lions just because they're at Jerry World and we're pretty good at home. And the Lions give up a lot of points. So yeah, I'm fairly confident on that one, but you never know. So the Lions have got a lot to play for as well. So maybe they've got more to play for than the Cowboys at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even if I think you're guaranteed at least one playoff win because I think you beat the Bucks. If you do have the 5th seed, you beat in Tampa Bay, and I think if you get the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th seed, I think you beat any of those teams you mentioned before. Really, there's teams that are battling out for the final 2 spots. I think that you still got a chance at the 1 seed, and Niners have got quite an easy schedule. Same with the Eagles, so probably not. But I think ultimately, I think you'll make at least the divisional round. I think by then, anything's possible. But I do think, like ourselves, you do need to be at home. I think that's a big thing. I think you guys more knows. I think you guys obviously on turf compared to not on turf is a whole different ballgame. And that's why I'd love to see one day you guys play in London again because you guys on turf seem to be amazing. And I think I'd love to see that in the Tottenham Stadium because I think that would be almost a guaranteed win. Whoever you play, I think if you play on turf in London, I think you'll be guaranteed. I think that's got to be soon, isn't it? You guys haven't played in London in years. When do you reckon
Yeah,
you'll play in London again? It's been 2016, 2015, the last time you were there.
it's like a decade. Yeah, it's a long time. And actually, I missed out on tickets and I tried to get tickets last minute and something fell through and I ended up watching it in a terrible bar in London. And yeah, I was okay, they'll be back. They'll be back. And it's been longer than I expected. Like if they, it doesn't even need to be London at this point. If it was Germany, I'd be there in a shot if I could get a ticket. My concern is they're going to play a game in Brazil, aren't they? The NFL next year. It's just another chance that they end up in Brazil rather than Europe. So that'd be pretty gutting.
Would
Put it in
you keep it
perspective, I
there?
think the people that scored touchdowns on that day were Des Bryant, Terrence Williams, and Cole Beasley, which probably tells you how long ago it
Wow,
was.
that is
Tony Romo was throwing passes.
wow.
Allen Robinson was still playing for the Jags, I think.
Wow, okay.
So it was that long ago that it's been since they've been here. So yeah, you missed the entire Zeke era since they last played in the UK.
And Dak here as well. Whether he'll play out, we don't know. Now, you weren't helped on later in the week by the Eagles beating the Giants, ending their 3-game losing streak, beating the Giants 33-25. I score and I actually think flatters. It doesn't actually do the game justice. I think the Eagles deserve that win. I think it was definitely more than a 1 touchdown game personally. But then the big one of the week was Ravens Niners. People saying Super Bowl preview, a Super Bowl 47 rematch as the Niners took on the Ravens in San Fran, and they lost. Just like I predicted in our last episode, the Ravens did beat the Niners 33-19. This for me was, I mean, I still think Tyreek Hill, McCaffrey should get it, but if a quarterback's going to win it, I think this game for me secured Lamar Jackson. If there's been any quarterback winning it, it'll be him. And I thought the Ravens, for me, sent out a real statement against, albeit a Niners that, they were already won the division, so you could easily see him taking a foot off gas for the week. But even so, Lamar Jackson, I thought, looked amazing in this game.
Yeah, I mean, there's some weird stats that came out of this game. Like, did you know that Lamar Jackson is 20-1 against the NFC?
Is he?
That's ridiculous, isn't it? Isn't that
I
just the most
didn't
crazy
even
thing
know
anyone's ever heard? Um, so I guess maybe we shouldn't be surprised by that. I think probably the showing more on the Niners and Brock Purdy, who's been, very safe with the football, was not safe with the football, and admittedly, not all of the throws that he made were entirely his fault. That it turned out to be an interception. Some of them were, and yeah, someone that's been just so safe throughout the whole career, basically in the NFL. He really did get undone, you say, by the Ravens here. And yeah, the Ravens just look like they're playing good complementary football. I wouldn't necessarily want it at cancer, but yeah, they look hard to beat. I'd be worried if I was a Miami Dolphins fan like yourself going into week 17 personally. But if they're 20, if Lamar's 20-1 against the NFC, it means the teams are playing a bit more regularly, maybe have a bit more of an idea about how to actually play against him. So I guess you never know. And yeah, always nice to see the Niners lose a little bit because they've had it way too good over the last few years, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the game massively worries me come Sunday. I mean, people have been going on the fact that two is 2-0 against the Ravens, and if you have beaten them the last 2 years, but that was with a whole different coordinator there, different players, etc. But we have beaten them. We beat them, I think, in shock fashion 2021 season and 2022 season. We had a massive comeback. So I think we know we can beat them. And McDaniel's beaten them. And Lamar Jackson had a great day that day as well. But I think, I'd almost back them to win an NFC Super Bowl more than an AFC title game. I think that NFC record just proves that, he could probably have a more chance of beating the team in the Super Bowl than he would a team in the AFC Championship game. But I think they're certainly a team that will, I think if they're not at least in the divisional round, I'll be shocked. I think they'll probably go as in the one seed. And then I think as it stands, they could be playing potentially the Chiefs. No, they'll probably be. So where it's going to go is probably going to be the Bills. I'd say Bills, Chiefs, Dolphins, Ravens in the divisional round, and I think the Bills have the sixth seed rather than the second or third seed. If they don't win the division, I can see them beating the Chiefs, which would mean they play the Ravens, which means the Dolphins would play either the Browns or the Jags. Now, I think if that's the case, then I do think that we could see potentially him go out in the divisional round, but also you could see him beat the Chiefs as well. I think they would beat the Chiefs on current form. So yeah, I think it's certainly exciting time to. But then again, they were number one seed all those years ago in 2019, and Derrick Henry came up and showed them and knocked them out. So I think we've seen it before, and I think we've seen John Harbaugh do it in the regular season. Not seen him yet doing the postseason, apart from that one year they won it, where Joe Flacco had that insanity run. But yeah, I think ultimately they are a good team. And quick question for you: you mentioned 20-1 against NFC teams. Can you name that NFC team that beat them?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, no,
And I can name the quarterback. The quarterback was Danny Dimes
yeah,
for the New York Giants.
yeah. It was week 6 last season. It was um the Giants went 5-1. They won 24-20 over the Ravens. Giants 5-1. Seems mad that's a year ago. Remember,
It does.
I was at the game when they went 6-1 as well. I saw them go 6-1 against the Jags in Jacksonville. And who'd have thought just over a year later, they'd be, what, 5-6 wins this year? And
Right.
Danny Dimes isn't even isn't even the favorite quarterback from Giants fans. They all prefer DeVito. So, yeah, it's crazy how a year makes a difference in the NFL. It shows just why we love this league. Anything can happen week to week, year on year.
Well, yeah, I mean Lamar wasn't going to be playing for the Ravens, right? Like this sort
Yes,
of time
yeah.
last year. So things do change very quickly. But yeah, I think the Ravens are a well-run organization. It'd be quite nice for them to actually see them make it. I mean, have you seen about this conspiracy thing that people have known for a long time that it was going to be the Niners and the Ravens in the Super Bowl? Have you heard about this?
The one all those years ago, or mean this year?
Oh no, for this year.
Really?
But yeah, because like the logo for the Super Bowl, it used to be like completely different every single year, and then the last few years it's basically been the same logo, but they've updated some of the colors, and there'll be two different colors on it. And there was one for last year, which was at the beginning of the season. It was red and turquoise, and then of course, it was the Chiefs and the Eagles, and I can't remember what the one the year before was.
How did
Um,
people from
but
Bengals,
then
Rams?
this year it was oh, so yeah, maybe it was like yellow and um, yeah, and then for this year it was purple and
Oh my God, yeah, because
red.
I'm looking
So
at people from
they've actually
Christmas.
changed it. They've actually updated the logo. So if you Google it, maybe you wouldn't find it. But yeah, it was purple and red, the original. So people have been saying that it's like it's in the script. You know, people have got this whole script thing
Yeah.
that they like trying to peddle for some reason. Yeah, so people believe that it's going to be the Ravens and the 49ers for quite a while, but it could happen. But I think to be fair, I do think they're probably the two best teams. But as you say, any given Sunday, anything could happen. Strange stuff happens in the NFL all the time, and that's actually something that's probably quite nice about that Ravens 49ers game. There wasn't like anything like completely bizarre that happened that just completely changed the course of the game. It was two teams that were just playing ball, and that's sort of the way that it happened, really. So yeah, I think they'll both be strong going into the playoffs, and probably the safest bet for a Super Bowl if there is one. But yeah, you never know. There's always some surprise team usually that does a bit better than we expect. Usually it's the Bengals. I'm not sure it's gonna be the Bengals this year.
Well, it's interesting. I've looked at it now, and obviously the Super Bowl 56 logo has red and orange and yellow. Super Bowl 50 is, yeah, I think it's spooky. The last 3 years have had, because the teams that have played it, and yeah, purple and red. I was hoping to see, aqua there, but no, sadly not for this year. But you never know. Whilst on that topic, actually, you have sort of potentially answered that question for me now. But who would be your Super Bowl matchup if you had to pick the two teams that are going to play in February in Vegas? Which two teams are going to play?
Well, I'll go against what I just said because I think it's a bit of a safe answer. With my Dolphins friend, we've been trying to speak into existence Dolphins and Cowboys. So why on earth not? It'd be a hell of a fun game, I think.
I agree. I mean, I'm not one of these people that hate Dallas Cowboys. I actually have a little soft spot for them. I don't know why. Maybe it's the jersey you're wearing right now. I don't know, but I've never really had the hatred towards the Cowboys like most NFL fans do. So I've always said that. Yeah, I think my perfect Super Bowl was Bears Dolphins, but that's not going to happen. Certainly the Bears side of things. So I think certainly Lions or Cowboys I'd love to face because I think that I wouldn't mind losing to those two teams. Um, but I do. I've said I've said Chiefs Niners for the last God no weeks, and I'm still going to say that. But
Oh,
to say on camera now, in case it comes true, I will not be shocked if it's Bills. I'll be not. The Bills are playing that well, and they're playing good football at the right time. They've
yeah.
changed coordinators, and I genuinely think the Bills could actually. I think they'll lose to the Niners, but I think they would make a Super Bowl. I think generally I think they're a team that people should be giving way much more attention to. I think they already are. Tony Romo actually surprisingly isn't actually. I'm surprised he isn't doing more Josh Allen cheerleading. But it's I do think the Bills are a team that are in great form, and I think they're hitting form in the right time. They could still win the division. They could still get home advantage in the playoffs. And I think right now that they would be. I think they beat the Ravens. I think they beat the Chiefs, and I think they beat us in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm going to stick with Chiefs Niners, but I do think that I will not be shocked if the Bills win the AFC. And then finally, who would your MVP vote go for? Go to even.
Well, without being a homer, uh, hmm. I mean, I would like to see it not go to a quarterback, so then it sort of narrows it down probably to CMC or Tyreek Hill. Uh, I think I'll go CMC, partly to annoy you because you're a Dolphins fan, but also just because we obviously saw the other week when Tyreek went down how they've still got Waddle, who's still a really high draft pick, a real high caliber receiver, and they didn't feel like they missed a beat massively. I think if the Niners lost CMC, like on the weekend, bar a few breakout runs from George Kittle against a top quality opponent in the Ravens, I think they're really quite lost without CMC in that system, really. So yeah, I'm going to go CMC as MVP.
Well, he was actually my pick for a lot of the season in this sort of question until we lost the Titans with that Tyreek Hill, and I think that he almost, I think, helped with MVP case without playing in that game. And obviously, he's still chasing. I think the record might be out of reach now, but you can still get the record, the 2,000 yard record. And I think that I think this is the one year where you can give it to non-quarterback. I think that it's the one year where there hasn't been a standout. I think what is Lamar Jackson for me if it is quarterbacks. Now, I will say, if the Patriots were good offensively, I think TJ Watt would be a much more of a shout because if they were a team that was leading the AFC North, or they were the number one seed in the AFC, and he was playing away. He is 17 sacks, I think. He's leading the league in sacks again this year. I think he could be someone that could have won it defensively, but I think ultimately, if it's not Lamar Jackson, Tyreek Hill, McCaffrey, I would be shocked. I do think personally, I would give it Tyreek Hill. I'm not being biased. I just think that he has been that good. He's been electric. He's potentially going to break a record. So I think for me, Tyreek Hill gets it. But I think if Lamar Jackson has another performance like the Niners against us, where he takes us apart, another team who's going for the number one seed, I do think that would help his case again. And I think that he has been good this year. So I think, yeah. But I do think, would he be the worst quarterback to win two MVPs? I can't think of many quarterbacks that have won back-to-back MVPs or won multiple MVPs and been worse than Lamar. I mean, Manning's better than him of career-wise. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Joe Montana. I can't think of any quarterbacks that won it twice that are better than that are worse than Lamar Jackson in terms of looking at his career. Only one playoff win so far in his career.
Yeah, less than Dak Prescott. That's usually
Yeah.
a good
Oh yeah.
measuring stick for a lot of people because people that's something we share in common actually is like a Dolphins and Cowboys fan that everyone loves bashing Tua and Dak. Like really, they love their misery for some reason. But I get what you're saying about the double MVP worst quarterback. It's a very negative view, but I'm actually not a massive Lamar Jackson fan, so I don't hate it. I'm just not really a scrambly quarterback sort of guy. Really, I'm more of a pocket passer sort of fan. So, uh, on the CMC thing, just to try and give it an extra bit of if CMC needs to pad some stats, they're playing the Commanders this weekend, so anything could happen. If he got 300 yards of offense on his own, I wouldn't be like shocked because the Commanders are really, really bad.
And also, I believe he built a record. He tied a record earlier this year for most consecutive games with the touchdowns.
Right.
So, and also, they are a team that are the number one seed, and Brock Purdy should not be anywhere near for me MVP contention. I've just found the list of all the people that have won more than one Super Bowl. Sorry, more than one MVP. So here's a list. I think I could safely say every player on this list. There's one running back actually, but every player on this list, I think, had a better career than Lamar Jackson. So you got Peyton Manning with 5, Rodgers with 4. With 3, you've got Tom Brady, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, and Jim Brown, the only non-quarterback in this. Wow, 3 MVPs. And then 2, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Kurt Warner, Patrick Mahomes. Now, Warner's the only one that you can maybe put in this conversation, but I'd have all of them above Lamar Jackson. If I was doing an all-time NFL team and I had a quarterback, I'd pick any of these quarterbacks above Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I just gave it away. I said I'm not a massive Lamar Jackson fan, so I would too. But yeah, and also even the Kurt Warner thing. I've just been finished watching the movie about his life. So I guess I'm like into Kurt Warner right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually met Kurt Warner. Don't know whether he went to these NFL UK live events that they did before COVID. I did one in Birmingham, then I did one in Cardiff with Kurt Warner there, and Michael Irvin, which that's what reminded me as well.
Sweet.
I got a picture with Kurt Warner after the event, which is really cool. And I remember on that event, actually, anyone who went to that event in Cardiff will know exactly what I'm going to say. They did a challenge where they try and find the most famous person to FaceTime on the live show, and Kurt Warner got Tom Brady to FaceTime. He actually answered his phone, so I can say, along with all the ones that were in this crowd on that day, that I had been technically on FaceTime with Tom Brady. But
yeah, right, definitely, you definitely
yeah,
can claim that.
halfway.
Yeah.
I wasn't right at the back. I was in the middle of the stage. I wasn't. I was fairly close to it. So yeah, that was really surreal. But yeah,
Did
that was
you say Michael Irvin? Michael Irvin was there.
yeah, it was Mike. I think it was Cliff Averill, and there was a fourth one. I forget who it is now. Apologies for that person if I've forgotten the name. But Kurt Warner and Michael Irvin talked for so much in it. The other two were just completely silenced out of the thing.
I was
Because
going to say it's amazing anyone got a word in with Michael Irvin there.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
he was
he
by
is an
far the
energetic
loudest.
guy.
Yeah. Him and Kurt Warner definitely the two chatterboxes of the four. But that is where we'll end the podcast for today. So, first of all, huge thank you to Alan for once again joining the show.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
It's been great. And hopefully, we'll see you again in the playoffs. Or we will do
Yeah,
because we'll be in for the playoff preview episode. So, yeah, looking forward to having you back on in the playoffs and hopefully have you on for our Super Bowl preview episode.
exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully, with me
Yeah,
and
see you
another
in
Dolphins fan.
Vegas.
Oh, can you imagine? That'll be the odds on that must be incredible. Cowboys Raiders odds right now. Someone let me know in the comments what that would be. A Cowboys Raiders Super Bowl, what the odds are right now. I'd love to find out what that is. I reckon at least
Nice.
100 to 1, if not more.
Oh, I think probably longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Put
But
a pound, put a
we
pound
can
on it.
dream.
Yeah, you put a pound on it. What's the worst going to happen? You lose a pound.
Exactly.
You listen to this podcast, do that now on whatever site you use to make your bets.
Good tip.
That is where we'll end the podcast. So this has been the Across the Pod podcast, our Week 16 review. I've been Andy, it's been Alan, and we will see you guys next time.